I saw the message at 10:03 p.m., when I should have been closing my laptop and letting my brain turn to static. Instead, I was still at my dining table, half-finished deck open on one side of the screen, family group chat open on the other. The little notification bubble popped up with my sister's name. Tessa. So Christmas is confirmed, just us this year. Me, Mark, the kids, Mom and Dad, Jake and Liv. Easier if we keep it small, no extras. We can drop Grandma at yours the night before though, right? I read it twice. Just us. No extras. I saw the message at 10:03 p.m., when I should have been closing my laptop and letting my brain turn to static. Instead, I was still at my dining table, half-finished deck open on one side of the screen, family group chat open on the other. The little notification bubble popped up with my sister's name. Tessa. So Christmas is confirmed, just us this year. Me, Mark, the kids, Mom and Dad, Jake and Liv. Easier if we keep it small, no extras. We can drop Grandma at yours the night before though, right? I read it twice. Just us. No extras. A quiet, almost clinical kind of numbness spread through my chest, like someone slowly drawing a curtain across a window. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, until my reflection appeared over my sister's words. Hair scraped into a knot. Glasses smudged the soft grooves at the corners of my mouth that made me look tired, even when I wasn't. No extras. That was me. I was the extra. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A dozen versions of myself flickered across my mind in fast succession. The big sister who had cosigned. Tessa as first apartment. The one who'd wired money at midnight when Jake's car broke down. The daughter who sat in plastic hospital chairs doing Grandma's paperwork, while my parents took turns saying they couldn't miss work. Apparently, none of those versions counted as us. My first instinct was to type something sharp. Something like, I didn't realize I'd been demoted from family to babysitter. Instead, I sat back and let the silence stretch. It's a strange thing, how silence can be louder than any scream. In that moment, I realized I was too tired to perform gratitude for being allowed to host the grandmother nobody else wanted to be stuck with on Christmas. The chat bubbles appeared again. Mummo, that sounds good, honey. Smaller is better this year. Dad, works for me. Clara, you okay to have Grandma? She likes your place. They had already moved on to logistics, assuming my yes. My consent was a default setting in this family, something they never had to check. I felt the familiar ache stir in my chest, the small, practiced voice that always said, it's fine. Be kind. Don't make things harder. They're stressed. You can handle it. I looked at the half-finished presentation on my screen, an expansion plan for a client who had no idea that the woman building their next seven-figure quarter sat alone on a Thursday night doing the emotional math of being quietly erased. My name was Clara, and I owned a consulting firm that had doubled its revenue 3 years in a row. I'd built a life on understanding numbers, patterns, tiny shifts that meant everything. And this message from the people who should have known me best was a pattern I could no longer afford to ignore. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Sure, I can have Grandma. It was the answer they expected. The answer that kept the peace. The answer that didn't require them to see me. I typed it anyway. Then I added a single extra sentence. Clara, sure, I can have Grandma. I'll sort out Christmas on my end. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. A decision, small and quiet, clicked into place somewhere deep inside me. For the first time in a very long time, I knew I wasn't going to let this slide. I didn't sleep much that night. When I did drift off, my dreams were crowded. Tessa laughing in a kitchen full of warm light. Jake chasing his kids through wrapping paper. My parents in matching novelty sweaters. The kind of Christmas that looked good in photos. I woke up at 5:41 a.m. to the usual silence of my apartment, the skyline outside my window still mostly dark. For a few seconds, I lay there trying to remember why my chest hurt. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand, screen lit up with new messages. Tessa, you're the best, Mom. Thank you, sweetheart. We'll bring her over on the 23rd so you can settle in. No one asked what I meant by sort out Christmas on my end. Of course they didn't. In their version of the story, my life was a blank space. I was the flexible one, the one who didn't really care about traditions, because I worked a lot and didn't have kids. The one who would adjust around everyone else's needs. I padded into the kitchen, made coffee on autopilot, and leaned against the counter while the machine hummed. My brain, ever efficient, tried to move on. There were clients to call, contracts to review, a hiring decision to finalize. But underneath all of that, something else was working. A different part of me was running calculations that had nothing to do with quarterly projections. What hurt the most wasn't that they'd chosen a smaller Christmas. It was that they'd chosen it without even telling me there was a choice. They decided who counted as us and relegated me to logistics. The drop-off point for the one person they still felt obligated to include, but not really accommodate. The coffee machine beeped. I poured, wrapped my hands around the mug, and walked to the window. On the sill, framed in cheap brass, was a photo from 8 years ago. My grandma and me on the day I signed the paperwork for my first office space. Her hair was whiter then, her smile steady despite the cane she'd refused to let define her. You did this, she'd whispered that day, fingers squeezing mine, eyes glassy with pride. You built something from nothing, Clara. Don't let them tell you read difficult just because you refuse to stay small. It was Grandma who had given me $300 crumpled from a coffee tin when the bank laughed at my first business plan. Grandma who'd watched the kids so Tessa could focus on her marriage. Grandma who sat through my first awkward pitch deck in the living room, nodding like I was unveiling the cure for every problem in the world. And now she was an item on a to-do list. Drop Grandma at Clara's. Like a package. I took a slow sip of coffee and looked at the photo until my vision sharpened. What if we just didn't do it their way this year? I asked the empty apartment. The idea arrived fully formed, as if it had been waiting for an invitation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I opened my laptop again, but not to work. Instead, I clicked open the tab I almost never touch, the one with the word rewards in cheerful blue letters. A dashboard appeared, full of numbers I'd long ago stopped paying attention to. Years of flights to conferences, last-minute trips to rescue projects other consultants had abandoned. Red-eye returns so I could make it to birthday parties and graduations I'd paid for, and then watch from the back. 284,000 airline miles. Hotel points I'd barely used. I stared at the total, then at the little photo of my grandma on the sill. What's your dream trip? I'd asked her once, half joking, when we were standing in line at the DMV. Paris, she'd said without hesitation. First class. I want to see if those seats are as big as they look on TV. And I want to eat a croissant in a real cafe where nobody rushes you. Then she'd laughed it off. But that's for rich people and movie stars, honey. I'm just happy when you come over with takeout. I hadn't forgotten. I just hadn't let myself believe I could actually give it to her. Now, with my family's group chat still open in the corner of my screen, messages pinging about Secret Santa, and who was bringing what dish, I moved my cursor to the search bar. From our city to Paris. Departure December 23rd. Return December 28th. Passengers 2. I hit search. A list of flights appeared. My pulse picked up when I saw the words business first flex. The number of miles looked obscene. Obscene. And suddenly, exactly right. I had poured so much of myself into making everyone else's life smoother. Ghostwriting their stability, funding their moments of joy, watching from the wings while they took bows they hadn't fully earned. What would it look like, just once, to take that same quiet power and aim it at my own definition of family? At the person who had never once treated me like an extra. I clicked on a flight that left late on the 23rd and arrived in Paris on Christmas Eve morning. Enough time to sleep on the plane. Enough time for magic. My hands shook as I filled in our names. Clara Wynne. Evelyn Wynne. I paid in miles, plus a slice of my savings for the taxes and fees. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox with a soft chime, something loosened in my chest. This, I thought, was what it felt like to choose yourself without apologizing. Not by slamming doors or setting things on fire, but by quietly changing the destination. Telling Grandma was the easy part. Paris, she repeated, sitting up straighter on her floral couch, the knit blanket sliding into her lap. As in France? As in France, I said, trying not to grin too hard. You, me, Christmas, first class, croissants, the whole cliché. Her eyes filled so quickly it caught me off guard. Oh, sweetheart, she breathed. Did you win the lottery? Something like that. I sat beside her and took her hand. Her skin was thin, cool, familiar. I've been saving miles for years. I just never knew when it would feel right to use them. And you want to use them on me? You, I said, and my throat tightened. You re the only one who ever made me feel like the things I do matter even when nobody is looking. It feels right that my first big splurge is with you. A tear rolled down her cheek. She swiped at it with a grumble. They're going to be mad, you know, she said after a moment, voice softer. Your mom, your sister, they like having me there to decorate things. I know. I watched the way her gaze flicked to the framed photos on her shelf. My parents, Tessa's kids in matching pajamas, Jake and his wife at some beach. In every picture, Grandma was off to the side, a little to the left of center. They didn't invite me, Gran, I said quietly. Not really. They invited themselves to drop you off like a parcel. Called it keeping it small. I'm tired of being small in their story. Her mouth tightened, the way it did when she was swallowing a dozen things she wanted to say. You have been keeping this family afloat for years, she said finally, each word precise. I may be old, but I'm not blind. You think I don't know who paid Jake's last semester? Who covered that surprise roof repair when your father's credit card bounced? Heat crept up my neck. I didn't do it for credit. I know you didn't. Her grip tightened. That's why it infuriates me that they still talk about you like you're optional, difficult, the child who doesn't like people. I let out a hollow laugh. I like people. I just don't like being used. Exactly. She leaned back, studying me with that piercing look that always made me feel 12, and seen in a way that was both comforting and unnerving. If they wanted you at that table, they would have said, "We're doing Christmas. It's not complete without you. How do we make that work?" They didn't. They asked if you could perform a service. Something in me unclenched at the bluntness of it. So, she said, eyes brightening, let's give them exactly what they asked for. I frowned. What do you mean? They wanted you to handle Grandma logistics. A mischievous smile tugged at her mouth. Well, you're handling me. Just in Paris. I laughed then, properly, the sound filling her small living room. I love you, I said. I know. She squeezed my hand again. Now tell me about first class. Do I get my own little pod? Will they let me steal the blanket? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. We spent the next hour planning like two teenagers plotting a heist. I pulled up photos of the cabin, double-checked wheelchair assistance at the airport, added notes about her medications to my phone. She fretted about what to pack, whether her old black dress was good enough for Paris, whether she needed a new coat. "We're buying you a proper coat," I said. "One that doesn't pretend polyester is enough to stand between you and European winter." "That sounds expensive. So is wasting your 70s on sofas you don't really want to be sitting on," I said without thinking. She paused, then nodded slowly. "I wish I'd chosen myself more when I was your age," she murmured. "If you're brave enough to do it now, don't let anyone guilt you back into the box." My family found out I'd be away 3 days later. Tessa called while I was in the middle of a Zoom with a client in London. I let it go to voicemail, finished the call, then listened with my earbuds still in. "Hey, so Mom said you mentioned you're not going to be around on Christmas." Her bright voice filled my office. "I thought you were just having Grandma and, doing your quiet thing. Where are you going?" "I just need to know drop-off times. My quiet thing." That was how she described my life. I waited a beat, then called her back. "Hey," she said, picking up on the first ring. "You're alive." "Last I checked." She laughed like I'd made a joke. "So, logistics queen," she said. "What's the plan for Grandma?" "We're thinking we'll bring her by the afternoon of the 23rd. That gives you time to—" "I won't be here on the 23rd, I said. Silence. "What?" "I'm leaving for a trip," I said, keeping my tone even. "Grandma's coming with me. We'll be back after Christmas." On the other end, I could almost hear the gears in her mind grinding to a halt. "You're taking Grandma away," she said slowly. "I'm taking Grandma with me," I corrected. "We're spending the holiday together." "Where?" "Somewhere that's not here." I let the answer hang, enjoying, just for a second, the novelty of not filling silence on her behalf. "Clara, this is—" Her voice sharpened. "That's kind of a big move to just decide without asking anyone, the way you all decided Christmas without asking me." I asked quietly. "That's not fair." The defensiveness came fast. "We're just trying to keep things simple. You know how much drama there was last year." "I know," I said. "I paid for half of last year, remember? The flights, the Airbnb, the surprise, 'we're short this month' text at midnight." "I remember," she faltered. "We were going through a lot," she said, softer. "Mark's job, the kids' moms." "I know," I repeated. "And I wanted to help. I don't regret that. But if simplicity means cutting me out while still expecting me to carry the unglamorous parts caregiving, logistics, bills, then maybe simple isn't as kind as it looks." On the other end, I heard her take a breath. "So what, you're punishing us?" she said. "By stealing Grandma and giving Grandma something she's wanted her whole life," I said. "And I'm giving myself something they're needed for a wild Christmas that doesn't revolve around convincing my family I have value beyond my credit score." She made a sound halfway between a scoff and a sigh. "You're being dramatic," she said. "And honestly, it feels selfish. The kids will be devastated. They'll have their parents, their grandparents, a house full of presents." I said, They'll survive one Christmas without the aunt who pays for the batteries and assembles the toys while everyone else takes photos." "Wow," she said. "Okay. I didn't realize you had this much resentment." I pressed my thumb into the edge of my desk, grounding myself. "It's not resentment," I said. "It's clarity. You made a choice. I'm making one too." There was a long pause. "So you're really not coming?" she said finally. "No," I said. "I'm really not. Mom is going to lose it," she muttered. "I hope you're happy." "I don't think happiness is the right word," I said. glancing at the Paris confirmation still pinned to my inbox. But I am at peace with it. She hung up soon after, with a brittle, "Merry Christmas then." That sounded more like a curse than a blessing. I stood in my quiet office, phone still in my hand, and waited for the guilt to crash over me. It didn't. There was sadness, yes. A familiar ache for the family I wished I had. The one that would have heard my hurt before it turned into distance. But threaded through it was something steadier. I had made a decision and stayed in it. No backpedaling, no cushioning their discomfort at the expense of my own. It felt new. The days leading up to the trip became a quiet rebellion stitched together by errands. I took Grandma shopping for a proper coat. Thick wool, a deep blue that made her eyes look like they'd stolen color from the sky. She fretted about the price until I reminded her of every time she de-slipped $20 bills into my wallet when I wasn't looking. "This is back pay," I said, draping the coat over her shoulders. "Plus interest. We found boots that wouldn't hurt her ankles, a scarf she kept calling too fancy, until I wrapped it around her neck and watched her stand a little taller. At home, I made lists. Medications, emergency contacts, copies of her passport. I booked an accessible room in a small hotel near the Seine, somewhere with an elevator and staff who answered emails kindly. In between, work flowed on. Clients approved proposals, my team shipped deliverables, invoices went out. The more I poured into making sure everything would run smoothly in my absence, the clearer a different truth became. I was capable of orchestrating complex systems, anticipating needs, creating order. I had trained myself to use those skills for everyone but me. Now, each neatly ticked box on my travel list felt like a tiny reclamation. The family group chat grew quieter, then louder in waves. There were pockets of normal, jokes about burnt cookies, photos of ugly sweaters, threaded with messages clearly meant for me. "Mum, we'll leave a plate for you in case you change your mind." "Dad, you don't have to make a point by staying away, sweetheart." It's not too late to rearrange your little trip." I didn't answer the bait. Instead, I sent one photo. Grandma in her new coat, standing in front of my apartment building, chin up, the city lights catching the silver in her hair. Underneath I typed, "We'll be out of the country. Love you both. Talk after the holidays." The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. No message came through. On the afternoon of the 23rd, I closed my laptop, turned off my work phone, and stood in the middle of my apartment. Everything was done. Auto replies set, out of office updated. Food in my fridge given to my neighbor with the 6 a.m. sourdough habit. For the first time in years, there was nothing tethering me to other people's emergencies. Grandma arrived an hour later, suitcase wobbling behind her, cheeks flushed with a mix of excitement and nerves. "I keep thinking you're going to call and say it was a joke," she said, as I helped her into the elevator. "I don't joke about croissants," I said. "Or you." At the airport, everything took longer than it should have. There were lines and security checks and the mild chaos of holiday travel. But at every small delay, Grandma squeezed my hand and whispered, "We're really doing it," like she couldn't quite believe time hadn't woken up and reversed itself. When the gate agent scanned our boarding passes and smiled, "You're in 2A and 2B, she said. "Right this way." Grandma's steps slowed. "Is this?" she started. Then we turned the corner, and the cabin opened up. Wide seats, soft lighting, people already sinking into their little cocoons of luxury. "Oh my," she breathed, watching her lower herself into the wide leather seat, running her hand over the stitched headdress like it might disappear. I felt something warm bloom behind my ribs. This was what my work was for. Not approval from people who would never really be satisfied. Not status updates that vanished in 24 hours. This A woman who had fed me soup when I was sick and clapped at my primary school plays, now tucking a plush blanket over her knees at 30,000 feet, mouth open in childlike delight, as the flight attendant offered her sparkling water in a real glass. As the plane took off, she reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said over the hum of the engines. "Not just for this, for refusing to let them keep shrinking you." I swallowed past the lump in my throat and squeezed back. Out the window, the city lights fell away. A different kind of Christmas was waiting on the other side of the dark. Paris on Christmas Eve tasted like butter and air so cold it made our cheeks sting. We moved slowly, deliberately. I refused to turn our trip into another project to manage. Our first morning we sat in a cafe near the hotel for nearly 2 hours, sharing 2 croissants between us because Grandma insisted she didn't need a whole one. We watched people hurry past in coats and scarves, snippets of French bumping against the glass like birds. "I don't understand a word," Grandma said, eyes shining. "But I love the way it sounds." We wandered along the river, resting often. I pointed out the way the light hit the water, how every bridge seemed to carry a different story. We didn't rush to check landmarks off a list. Instead, we chose a handful. A small church around the corner, the bookstalls by the Seine, the Christmas market we'd read about online. Everywhere we went, Grandma greeted strangers like they were neighbors. "Your grandmother is charming," one shopkeeper told me after she spent 5 minutes complimenting the handmade ornaments in halting English. "She is," I said, feeling a swell of affection so big it startled me. That afternoon, while Grandma napped at the hotel, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. 43 unread messages. Most were from the family group chat. The latest photo showed my parents' living room, already half decorated, my niece and nephew tangled in tinsel. Underneath, Tessa had written, "Not the same without you, Gran and Clara. Hope your trip is worth it." Another photo followed. The dining table laid out, my usual seat empty. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could feel the old scripts rising. Apologize, explain, justify. Make it easier for them to sit with their discomfort. Instead, I went to my camera roll and chose a picture I'd taken that morning. Grandma at the cafe window, coffee cup cradled in both hands. Paris reflected in the glass around her like a soft halo. I sent it with a single line. "Merry Christmas Eve from us." There was a flurry of responses. "Mom. Paris. DAD. Wow. Since when can you afford Paris?" Tessa. "First class and Paris. Didn't realize your little business was doing that well." Jake. "Looks nice. But I hope this trip was worth making Mom cry." The edges of my vision fuzzed for a moment. That familiar rush of guilt trying to flood in. I took a breath. Set the phone face down. Then I went to wake up Grandma. So we wouldn't to miss the church service she de-circled in her guidebook 3 times. We were sitting on a wooden pew in a small stone church when my phone buzzed again. I'd silenced it for the hymns, slipping it into my coat pocket. But in the quiet between songs, I felt it vibrate insistently. When the service ended and people began to shuffle out, I pulled it out. 10 missed calls from my mother. A voicemail notification. My stomach tightened. "Go on. See who's missing you," Grandma said softly. "I'll say a quick prayer for your grandfather's patience wherever he is. He'd be thrilled you finally took a vacation." I slipped into a side alcove and pressed play on the voicemail. "Clara," my mother's voice came, brittle and high. I don't even know where to begin. You've humiliated us. Your father's colleagues are here, and everyone's asking where my mother is. We said she wasn't feeling well, but then Tessa shows your picture like it's some kind of flex. Paris? Really? With my mother? Without even asking us? After everything we've done for you? I almost laughed at that. A sharp sound that stuck in my throat. You think money solves everything, she continued. You think you can just throw your success around, and it makes you better than us. Well, newsflash, young lady, family is about showing up. Not about private jets and... She stumbled, clearly unsure exactly how we traveled. And whatever you're doing over there. You've ruined this Christmas. I hope you're happy. Call me back. We need to talk about what happens when you get home. The message ended. I stood there, phone cold in my hand, the murmurs of French around me blending into a soft hum. There it was. Everything they thought of me, distilled into one panicked, angry outburst. Not the years of quiet transfers labeled just in case. Not the afternoons spent unclogging their printers and fixing their Wi-Fi and gently untangling their arguments. Not the way I'd sat by my father's hospital bed, spooning him ice chips while he complained about the hospital food. I was, in their minds, a selfish, show-off daughter who thought she was better than them, because I'd chosen, once, to step out of the supporting role. I looked up. Through a stained glass window, I could see the faint outline of the city beyond. Messy, beautiful, indifferent. In that moment, the anger I expected didn't come. What came instead was a deep, aching grief. I found Grandma near the votive candles, lighting one with careful hands. You look like someone just told you Christmas was cancelled, she said. Mom left a voicemail, I said. Apparently I've ruined Christmas. Ah, she nodded, unsurprised. Did you also cause climate change and invent taxes while you were at it? Despite everything, I snorted. She thinks I'm being cruel, I said. That I'm showing off. Of course she does, Grandma said matter-of-factly. If she admits you were simply treating yourself with the same generosity you've always treated them, she'd have to look at all the times she benefited from you being small. I swallowed. I don't want to be at war with my family, I whispered. You're not, she said. You're just at peace with yourself for the first time. The people who liked you better exhausted will experience that as loss. That doesn't mean you're wrong. We stood there for a long moment, watching the candles flicker. When we go home, I said finally, I think I need to have some hard conversations, and maybe walk away from certain obligations. You do, she said. And when you do, remember this trip. Remember that you're not cruel or selfish or dramatic. You're a real woman who took her grandmother to Paris because no one else thought she was worth planning around. The tightness in my chest eased. You always did have a way with words, I said. I had to, she smiled. Your grandfather was very sure he was right about everything. Someone had to talk sense back into the room. We flew home on the 28th. By then, Paris had woven itself into the soft places of my memory. The way Grandma's laughter echoed off the stone walls of the market, the feel of her arm linked through mine as we walked slowly along the river, the way she'd fallen asleep leaning on my shoulder on the metro, like I was the safest place she knew. At the airport, while we waited for our luggage, I checked my phone. There were fewer messages now. Disappointment had cooled into silence. One text from my father stood out. Dad, we need to talk about what happened. Your mother is very upset. Call when you land. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I opened a different app, my banking. Scrolling through the recurring payments, I saw them laid out in black and white. The transfer to Jake labeled student loan. He finished his degree 2 years ago and kept forgetting to cancel the automatic debit. The monthly payment to the vacation fund Tessa and Mark had set up, which I'd agreed to contribute to, just until they were back on their feet. They'd gone on 2 trips since, both carefully curated on Instagram with captions about hard work paying off. The prescription account I'd set up for Grandma, the only one I didn't resent. One by one, I cancelled the ones that had quietly bled me for years. Then I set up a new transfer. This one directly into an account in Grandma's name. What are you frowning at? She asked, watching me from the wheelchair the airline had provided. I'm reorganizing, I said. Your life? She asked. My boundaries, I said. But close enough. She smiled. Good. Just don't cut them off from your heart entirely. That kind of surgery scars the surgeon too. I don't plan to, I said. I just won't be financing their denial anymore. The conversation with my parents happened 2 days later, at their kitchen table. They'd insisted on face-to-face. So I drove over, leaving Grandma at home with a new stack of French crime novels Dee insisted on buying at the airport for the challenge. The house smelled like stale gravy and pine. The tree was still up, though some of the lights had gone out, leaving dark gaps. My mother didn't hug me when I walked in. She stood with her arms folded, lips pressed thin. Well, she said, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Hi, Mom, I said. My father sat at the table, glasses low on his nose, a spreadsheet open in front of him like a shield. Sit, my mother said, gesturing to the chair across from her. We need to understand what possessed you. I sat. The wood felt cold beneath my palms. I took Grandma on a trip, I said. To Paris. Because she's always wanted to go. Because you were planning to drop her at my apartment like a coat you didn't want to hang on to. That's not fair, my father said. We were going to visit between courses, I asked. Between you entertaining your friends and managing the kids' meltdowns and posing for photos. He flinched. My mother bristled. You're twisting things, she said. We thought you preferred it that way. You always say you don't like big gatherings. I didn't like being talked over and assigned tasks while everyone else feels entitled to my time and money, I said. That's different, she blinked. Money, she said slowly. So this is about money? Partly, I said. It's about patterns. About the way my contributions only count when they are invisible. The way my work is that little business, until it buys you a new dishwasher, or pays for a vacation. And then the story becomes, we scraped together just enough. My father shifted in his chair. We never asked you to. You did, I said calmly. You just don't want to remember it that way. Midnight calls. Just until the bonus comes through. We'd be so embarrassed if the bank knew. I helped because I love you. But love doesn't mean I have to accept being treated as an extra when it comes to the things that matter. The kitchen clock ticked loudly between us. You made your mother cry, my father said finally, as if it were the trump card. I know, I said. I cried too. When I read that message calling me an extra. When I realized that the only way I got a place in your Christmas was by being useful. My mother's eyes flashed. We never said you weren't family, she snapped. You said just us and listed everyone but me, I replied. You offered to drop Grandma like a package at my door. If that's not saying it, it's certainly acting it. Her shoulders sagged, just a fraction. We're old, she whispered. We don't always think about how things sound. Maybe, I said. But I'm too old now to live on crumbs of consideration. I don't need you to perform some grand apology. I just need you to understand that the way things were can't continue. My father glanced at his spreadsheet, then at me. What does that mean? Practically, he asked, ever the accountant. It means, I said, that I've stopped the extra financial support. Jake's loan payments, Tessa's vacation fund. I'll still help Grandma, because she's on a fixed income and she's never treated me like a resource. But I won't be the emergency exit you never acknowledge exists. My mother's mouth fell open. You can't just, I can, I said. And I have. For a moment the only sound was the clock. Then my father sighed, long and low. We didn't realize it was. So much, he said. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't want to realize. It was easier to pretend I was fine, because I wasn't making noise. My mother's eyes filled. So this is it? She asked. You punish us forever. You and your grandmother have your little Paris memory, and we're… What? The villains? I shook my head. You're my parents, I said. That won't change. I'm not cutting you off from my life unless you decide you don't want me in it. I'm just stepping out of a role that was slowly killing me. She swallowed hard. And Christmas? She asked. Are you going to boycott every year? I don't know, I said honestly. Next year, if I come, it will be because you want me there as part of us, not because you need a babysitter, a caterer, or a walking checkbook. We sat there in the discomfort of that truth. It wasn't a movie moment. They didn't leap up and apologize, tears in their eyes. There was no sweeping orchestral swell, no group hug that fixed decades of patterns. What there was, instead, was a small nod from my father. Will, think about what you've said, he murmured. My mother looked away, jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. It was not the ending the part of me that still believed in fairy tales wanted. But it was honest. And honesty, I was learning, was its own kind of peace. On New Year's Eve, I sat on my own couch with a glass of cheap champagne, watching the city lights flicker. My phone buzzed with the usual stream of digital noise. Marketing emails, generic well wishes, a meme from a friend, then a message from an unknown number. Unknown. I had to ask Gran for your number. It's Liv, Jake's wife. I frowned, then typed back. Clara. Hey Liv, what's up? 3 dots appeared. Liv. I just wanted to say, I didn't realize how much you were doing. For us. For Jake. He told me today because he realized the payments stopped. And he actually had to look at his statements. Another bubble. Liv, I'm sorry. For assuming you'd always pick up the slack. For the way we let them talk about you. It wasn't right. My throat tightened. Clara. Thank you for saying that. Liv. I don't know if it helps, but when the Paris photo came through, the kids said, Whoa, Aunt Clara's like, rich. And then my daughter said, I want to be like her when I grow up. Not because of the fancy stuff, because you took great-grand somewhere special. A tear slipped down my cheek, hot and unexpected. Clara, that helps more than you know. Liv. I hope next year looks how you want it to. With or without us. I set the phone down and let myself cry, quietly, the way I always did. But this time, the tears weren't just for what I wished my family had been. They were also for the woman I had finally allowed myself to become. A woman who could make hard choices without turning them into acts of war. A woman who could step away from a table that didn't have a seat for her and build a new one, even if 4. Now I only had 2 chairs. One for her, one for the grandmother who had always seen her. Midnight crept closer. I thought of Grandma, already asleep down the hall, her new Paris scarf draped over the back of her chair. I thought of my mother, probably doing one last round of resentful tidying before bed. My father, eyes on a screen full of numbers. I thought of myself, hair still smelling faintly of cold air and church candles, heart bruised but beating steady. When the countdown started faintly on someone's TV in the building, I whispered my own private resolution into the dim room. No more shrinking, I said. No more paying for a place in stories that pretend I'm not there. The city cheered. Fireworks cracked faintly in the distance. I raised my glass to the window, to my reflection, to the wide, unknown years ahead. I wasn't invited to family Christmas, so I took Grandma to Paris, first class. And in the process, I finally upgraded myself too. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.